Welcome back. It's likely that if on Inauguration Day, someone had told President Biden that more than a year later, he could have unemployment at 3.6% and dropping, wages in the stock market on the way up, and the housing market humming, he probably would have taken that deal. But there was a fine print: inflation. It's at a 4-decade high, and that has Americans sour about the economy overall. In our latest NBC News poll, adults disapprove of President Biden's handling of the economy by a nearly 2-to-1 margin. And it only has continued to grow. One person who saw inflation coming is former Clinton Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, who is now also predicting the U.S. is likely to fall into a recession next year if things don't change quickly. And Larry Summers joins me now. Mr. Summers, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Good to be with you.
Let me start with, what did you see that so many others missed? You know, we've seen predictions of inflation over the last 40 years. You're the one that seems to have gotten the timing of this hit right. What did you see?
I saw that we had a tidal wave of demand between zero interest rates from the Fed, a huge outpouring of saving that people had pent up from the COVID period, and massive fiscal policy from the December bill and then the stimulus bill that was passed. It just seemed to me that demand was going to overheat. We were going to have labor shortages. The bathtub was going to overflow, so to speak, and the inflation rate was going to pick up. And I think that did happen. And then things that I certainly didn't see, and I don't think others could have seen, the Ukraine war and all of the interferences in supply associated with that have created a bit of a perfect storm.
I'm curious, is it possible that with COVID and all the disruptions that caused, did we have basically two choices, a recession in the moment or throw money at the problem and risk inflation? Were we sort of stuck between two bad choices here?
I think we had very, very difficult choices, and I think people with good faith made choices. And I think while I disagreed with them at the time, I think the choices reflected the consensus of many outside economists. I think we were too slow to pick up on how rapidly the economy was recovering, and therefore we injected more demand into the economy, both in terms of deficits and in terms of monetary policy, than looks today to have been the right amount. Some of it was we were buying an insurance policy that we turn out not to have needed, just like I bought life insurance last year, and in a sense I wasted my premiums, but in a sense it was necessary to spend that money. But I was concerned last year that we were injecting too much demand into the economy, given all the configurations. And I don't think it was a sound strategy to create as big labor shortages as the labor shortages that we did create.
So, a recession, is it inevitable or is there a way to avoid it?
Nothing is inevitable or certain in economics, Chuck. The painful fact, though, is that historically, when we've had inflation above 4 and we've had unemployment below 4, essentially always since World War II, that's been followed by a recession within the next 2 years. Perhaps we will be fortunate and there'll be sufficiently rapid adjustments in commodity prices and other bottlenecks that will make that not happen. Perhaps the Fed will be extraordinarily skillful. But I think the Fed, and lucky, but I think the Fed has a very, very difficult job. I think we can make a contribution by doing things like the Strategic Petroleum Reserve release that holds down where oil prices would otherwise go. I think it's a time when we need to be looking at tariff reduction, because potentially that could take a percentage point off of the CPI. I think we need to look wherever we can at buying things more inexpensively when the federal government is purchasing. We need to look at immigration flows so as to address this labor shortage. But it's not going to be easy starting from where we are.
You believe most of the work probably has to be done by the Fed. But if for some magical reason the administration could get something passed with this Congress and of the agenda, and you've been a supporter of most of the Build Back Better agenda, what should be focused on that actually could reduce inflation and avoid a recession?
I think probably the most important thing, ironically, is some of the revenue increases that the president has talked about. Be very substantial benefits to closing a whole range of tax loopholes.
What kind of tax? Because you don't like the billionaire tax.
Yellen's.
You don't like the billionaire tax. What kind of tax would you like?
You're right. I don't like. You're right. I don't like the billionaire tax, but I do like the provisions that really go after corporations shielding money in the Cayman Islands, shielding money in Ireland. We negotiated a historic agreement to enable the world to tax global corporations, which it was losing the ability to do. And that agreement could fail if we don't do our part to implement the U.S. measures that are part of it. And we'd sacrifice a lot of revenue and pump up a lot of demand. So I think that is a very important set of steps. I think it's important to remember that over the longer term, the president's infrastructure bill is going to increase the capacity of the economy, and that will be a favorable development. But over the nearer term, I think the concentration on revenue is probably most important. For other reasons, I'd very much like to see the green investments that the administration is proposing, which over time will reduce our dependence on fossil fuels.
Larry Summers, there's a lot more I would love to be asking you, but I'm limited by the amount of time I have today. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your perspective. In short, the Fed and interest rates and possibly some taxes might be the best way to get the soft landing. Mr. Summers, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.